It had been 3 long months since Armand and Mira went their separate ways. The divorce papers were signed, but the memories still stayed with Armand like shadows that refused to fade. Every corner of his small house carried her presence. The way she used to place flowers on the table, the warm tea she made in the evenings, and the laughter that once filled the rooms were all gone. The silence felt heavy, and the loneliness seemed to grow each day. Armand tried to keep himself busy with work. He was an architect who spent most of his time designing buildings and drawing plans. Work helped him forget for a while, but the quiet evenings always brought back the ache. He had never thought that a love so deep could end in such quiet separation. There had been no shouting, no harsh words, only distance that slowly grew until it became a wall between them. One rainy evening, when the sky was covered with dark clouds and the wind carried a cool chill, Armand decided to clean the attic. The attic had been untouched for years, filled with old furniture, dusty boxes, and forgotten memories. He carried a small lamp with him and climbed the narrow stairs. The smell of old wood and dust greeted him as he reached the top. He switched on the small bulb that hung from the ceiling and looked around. The place was filled with memories of a time long gone. He began opening boxes one by one. There were old books, some clothes, and photographs from years ago. As he moved a few boxes aside, something caught his attention. It was a wrapped object leaning against the far wall. It was covered in brown paper and tied with an old rope. Out of curiosity, Armand untied the rope and carefully removed the wrapping. To his surprise, it was a painting. The frame was wooden and slightly worn, but the painting inside was beautiful. The painting showed a small cottage surrounded by tall green trees. The sky in the background was painted in golden and orange shades, showing a peaceful sunset. The details were soft and warm, almost alive. When Armand looked at the corner of the painting, he noticed a small signature written in fine letters, R. Das. His heart gave a small pause. That was the name of Mira's grandfather, Ramesh Das. Armand stood quietly, staring at the painting. He remembered that Mira's grandfather had been a painter. She had often spoken of him with affection, saying he used to paint simple things with deep meaning. But Armand had never seen this painting before. He wondered how it had ended up in his attic. Maybe Mira had forgotten it during the move, or perhaps it had been mixed with his things by mistake. He placed the painting on a small table and studied it more closely. Something about it felt unusual. The cottage looked peaceful, yet there was something hidden in the way the light and shadows played together. The trees seemed to lean slightly toward the window of the cottage, and the colors of the sky carried a soft glow that looked different from normal paintings. It felt as if there was more to it than what met the eye. Armand tilted the lamp closer to see better. As the light moved, he noticed faint letters near the bottom edge of the painting. They were almost invisible, written so lightly that they could only be seen from a certain angle. He leaned closer and read the words. They said, "Look beyond what you see." The message made him pause. It sounded like advice or a secret. He whispered the words softly to himself. Look beyond what you see. He could not understand what it meant, but it stirred something in his heart. The phrase seemed personal, almost as if it was meant for him. The old painter had always liked him, often telling him that real beauty was found by those who looked deeper. Maybe this painting carried one of those lessons. That night, Armand could not sleep. The painting rested on the table near his bed. He kept looking at it again and again, feeling that it was trying to say something. The more he stared, the more he felt connected to it. The sunset in the painting reminded him of the evenings he used to spend with Mira on the balcony, watching the sky change colors. He felt a wave of sadness but also curiosity. What was the message her grandfather wanted to give? The next morning, sunlight entered through the curtains and touched the painting. The golden light made the sky and the painting shine in a new way. Armand walked to it and noticed that one side of the wooden frame had a small uneven mark. He ran his finger over it and felt that it was slightly loose. He pressed gently and the wood moved. To his surprise, a small part of the frame opened like a hidden compartment. Inside it was a folded piece of paper. Armand carefully took it out. The paper was old and yellow, and the handwriting was elegant and neat. He unfolded it and began to read. It said, "My dear Mira, if you ever find this, remember one thing. What is broken can be rebuilt if you see with love, not only with eyes." Armand stood still, holding the note. It was addressed to Mira, but it had reached him. It felt like fate had led the painting to his hands. He read the words again slowly. The message was simple but powerful. It spoke not only to Mira but also to him. It was as if the old man had known that both of them would one day need this reminder. He thought about Mira and the quiet way they had drifted apart. There had been no anger between them, only silence. Maybe they had both stopped seeing each other with love. Maybe they had been looking only at mistakes instead of memories. The message from her grandfather touched something deep inside him. Armand sat down near the window with the letter in his hands. The rain had stopped and the sky outside was clear again. He looked at the sunlight falling on the painting and felt a strange calmness in his heart. For the first time in months, his thoughts were not filled with sadness but with a soft kind of hope. He placed the note safely inside a small book and kept the painting on his desk. All day he kept thinking about the words written in the note. The idea that what is broken can be rebuilt stayed in his mind. It made him realize that maybe endings are not always final. Sometimes they are only pauses waiting for understanding to return. The painting had become more than a piece of art for him. It was a message from the past, full of quiet wisdom. That night, Armand sat in the attic again, the painting glowing softly under the lamp. He remembered the smile of Ramesh Das and his kind words about love and patience. He closed his eyes and imagined the old man painting this very picture, putting his heart into every stroke. It felt as if the old painter was still there, guiding him through his grief, showing him a way to heal. The words from the note kept repeating in his mind. What is broken can be rebuilt if you see with love, not only with eyes. Armand felt that the message was meant to change something inside him. It was not just about Mira or their past. It was about learning to see life differently, to find beauty again even after loss. The painting had opened a door to something new, something he could not yet name but could already feel. And for the first time since the divorce, Armand smiled quietly to himself. The pain was still there, but it no longer felt like an end. It felt like a beginning waiting to unfold, hidden inside the colors of an old painting and the words of a man who had understood love better than anyone else. The next few days passed quietly for Armand, but his thoughts kept returning to the painting. It was no longer just an object hanging on the wall. It had become a part of his life again, something that carried meaning and warmth. Each time he looked at it, he felt that the old painter, Ramesh Das, was trying to guide him towards something he could not yet see. Every morning before leaving for work, Armand would stop near the painting for a few moments. He would study the light, the shadows, and the way the cottage in the painting seemed almost alive. The golden sky gave him peace. Sometimes he would trace the small hidden letters with his fingers, the ones that said, "Look beyond what you see." The words felt more powerful now. He began to believe they were meant for him, a reminder to look deeper not only into the painting but also into his own life. At work, Armand found himself thinking differently. He had always been quiet and serious, focused only on his projects. But lately, he began to notice small things that he used to ignore before. He noticed how sunlight touched the buildings he designed, how people smiled when they liked his ideas, how kindness and small actions made everything lighter. The message from the painting had started to change how he saw the world. One evening, as he was returning home, he passed by an art gallery that was open for a local exhibition. For the first time in years, he stopped and went inside. The room was filled with paintings from different artists. Some were bright, others calm. He walked slowly from one artwork to another, observing the colors and the emotions they carried. It reminded him of Ramesh Das and his gentle way of teaching through art. At the corner of the gallery, an elderly man was arranging a few frames. Armand approached him and said politely, "These paintings are beautiful. They remind me of someone who loved to paint like this." The man smiled warmly and replied, "Art always carries a story. Sometimes it speaks when words cannot." Armand nodded. He looked at one particular painting that showed a bridge across a river under the evening sun. Something about it felt peaceful, like a path leading from pain to calmness. The man noticed his interest and said, "That bridge represents hope." The artist painted it after losing someone close. He believed every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. Those words stayed with Armand as he left the gallery. The idea of new beginnings was something he had been avoiding. For months his heart had stayed closed, but now he started to feel a small light entering again. When he reached home, he sat near his own painting and thought about what the old man had said. Maybe that was what Ramesh Das wanted him to understand too. Later that night, he decided to call Mira after many weeks. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the phone. He did not know what to say or how she would react. For a few moments, he just looked at her number and then placed the phone back on the table. He was not ready yet. The silence between them was long and heavy. He knew that one phone call could bring back old memories, both sweet and painful. Instead, he chose to write a small note in his journal. He wrote, "Sometimes we have to rebuild not what is lost, but what is hidden within us. Maybe love does not end. Maybe it just waits for us to see it again." Writing this gave him comfort. It was as if he was slowly understanding the meaning behind the message in the painting. The next morning, Armand decided to clean the painting carefully. He removed the dust from its surface and studied every corner closely. As he wiped the frame gently, he noticed something new. Behind the layers of paint near the trees, there seemed to be a faint mark, almost like another hidden shape. He held the painting under better light and saw what looked like the outline of a key. It was faint but visible if one looked carefully. He felt a spark of curiosity again. Why would there be a hidden key shape inside the painting? Was it a clue or just part of the design? He took a magnifying glass and examined it closely. The key shape pointed toward the small window of the cottage in the painting. It was as if the painter wanted the viewer to focus there. Armand remembered the message written earlier. "Look beyond what you see." He took out the letter from the book where he had kept it safe. Reading it again made him feel a strange calmness. The words about rebuilding with love seemed to connect with this new discovery. Maybe the cottage window symbolized looking inside one's heart, the way a window lets light enter a dark room. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Ramesh Das had painted more than just a scene. He had painted a message of healing and hope. Later that day, Armand decided to visit the old house where Mira's grandfather used to live. It was in a quiet part of the town, surrounded by trees and open fields. The place had been sold after his passing, but Armand wanted to see it once more. He drove there in the afternoon and stood outside the small gate. The cottage looked almost the same as the one in the painting. The trees, the path, and even the color of the walls matched. He stood there for a long moment, feeling as if he had stepped inside the painting itself. Everything felt calm. The air carried the scent of wet soil, and the sound of birds filled the quiet. He closed his eyes and imagined the old man sitting near the window, painting while humming softly. It felt like the old soul was still present in the air around him. A kind-looking woman came out of the house. She was the current owner. Armand introduced himself and explained that he used to know the previous owner's family. The woman smiled and said, "He was a lovely man. Even after so many years, people still talk about his kindness. He left many paintings behind. Some are still kept in the storeroom if you want to see them." Armand followed her inside. The room smelled of paint and wood. On a shelf lay several old paintings, some unfinished. One of them caught his eye immediately. It showed a half-drawn version of the same cottage, but this one had a bridge near it leading toward a small garden. The unfinished stroke suggested the artist had planned to add more details. Underneath it were a few words written in light pencil. They said, "When the bridge is built, hearts will meet again." Armand felt his heart beat faster. The words seemed connected to everything he had discovered so far. The hidden key shape, the message about rebuilding, and now the mention of a bridge that connects hearts. It felt like a puzzle, and he was slowly finding its pieces. He thanked the woman for her kindness and left the place, his mind full of thoughts. As the evening arrived, he placed both paintings side by side in his home. The new discovery made him believe that Mira's grandfather had left behind a series of clues about love, forgiveness, and second chances. Armand sat near the window watching the fading light of the sunset and whispered softly, "Maybe it is not too late to rebuild." For the first time in many months, he felt peace growing in his heart. The pain of the past did not feel as heavy as before. The message behind the colors had started to heal him. He finally understood what Ramesh Das meant when he wrote, "Look beyond what you see." It was not only about the painting. It was about life itself, about seeing beyond mistakes and remembering the beauty that still lives within. That night, Armand closed his eyes with a gentle smile, ready to discover what more the painting had to tell him. Days turned into weeks, but Armand's thoughts continued to circle around the two paintings. One was the old painting of the cottage he found in his attic, and the other was the unfinished painting from the house of Mira's grandfather. Both paintings seemed to speak to each other, connected through their colors and hidden messages. He had started to believe that these paintings were not only works of art, but also pieces of wisdom left behind for him and Mira. Every morning before leaving for work, Armin would sit in front of the paintings for a few minutes. The cottage painting filled his heart with calmness, while the unfinished bridge painting made him think deeply. He noticed that both paintings shared the same soft golden light, as if they were painted during the same sunset. It made him wonder if the bridge in the second painting was meant to connect with the cottage in the first one. Maybe together they formed one complete story. The words written under the unfinished painting kept echoing in his mind. When the bridge is built, hearts will meet again. He thought about Mira whenever he read those words. He did not know if the message was about love or forgiveness, but it gave him hope. For the first time since the divorce, he began to feel that maybe the end of their marriage was not truly the end. Maybe it was only a pause waiting for understanding to return. One Sunday afternoon, he sat with a sketchbook and tried to draw the missing part of the painting. He was not a painter, but he had an eye for design from his work as an architect. Slowly, he started drawing what he imagined the bridge might look like. His lines were simple and careful. The bridge connected the cottage to the garden, crossing over a small river that shone under the evening light. When he finished, he looked at his sketch and smiled softly. The bridge symbolized more than just a path across water. It was a path across pain, a link between two hearts once separated by silence. Later that evening, Armin went to the balcony to watch the sunset. The sky was painted with the same golden shades that Ramesh Das had loved to use in his paintings. The warm colors reminded him of Mira's laughter and the peaceful evenings they once shared. He remembered how her grandfather used to say that sunsets teach us the art of letting go without fear, because every ending carries a promise of light. As he watched the fading sun, a thought came to his mind. Maybe it was time to see Mira again, not to bring back the past, but to share what he had found. He believed she had the right to know about the paintings and the hidden messages her grandfather had left. But part of him was still nervous. What if she did not want to see him again? What if the past had hurt her too much? He decided to take a few days to think before contacting her. In that time, he focused on restoring the first painting properly. He cleaned the frame, fixed the small cracks, and covered the back with a protective layer. He wanted to keep it safe. Each time he worked on it, he felt close to Ramesh Das, as if the old man was guiding him through every touch of the brush and every careful movement. A few days later, Arman visited a small art shop to buy supplies for cleaning and preserving the paintings. The shop owner was an elderly lady who had once known Ramesh Das. When Arman mentioned the name, her eyes lit up with recognition. She said Ramesh Das was a kind man. He used to come here often to buy colors. He always spoke about how every painting should carry a purpose. He believed art should heal hearts. Her words touched Armin deeply. He shared with her the story of how he found the painting and the hidden message inside. The woman listened with interest and said softly, "Then maybe you were meant to find it. Some things in life do not happen by accident. Maybe this is your turn to rebuild what time tried to break." Those words stayed with him as he walked home. He kept thinking that maybe destiny had indeed chosen him to discover this message. That night, he placed both paintings side by side again. As he looked at them, he noticed something new. When he aligned them carefully, the trees on the right side of the cottage painting matched perfectly with the trees on the left side of the bridge painting. It was as if the two were pieces of one larger painting. Together, they formed a complete landscape. The message under the unfinished painting suddenly made complete sense. Arman's heart filled with warmth and surprise. It was clear now that Ramesh Das had planned both paintings as one complete work. The bridge was meant to connect the two sides. The message, "When the bridge is built, hearts will meet again," was not just about art. It was a lesson about life, about connection, forgiveness, and rebuilding love. He stayed awake late that night, writing in his journal about what he had discovered. He wrote that sometimes people separate because they forget how to build bridges between their hearts. They let small misunderstandings turn into wide rivers. But bridges can be built again with kindness, patience, and understanding. The thought filled him with courage. The next morning, he made his decision. He would meet Mira. He packed both paintings carefully and placed them in his car. As he drove toward the small town where she now lived, his mind was calm but full of emotion. The road stretched ahead under the soft morning light. Every mile felt like a step toward something meaningful. When he reached her house, he parked outside and sat for a moment to gather his thoughts. He had not seen her for months. He wondered how she was, if she was happy, or if she still thought of him sometimes. Finally, he stepped out of the car and walked toward the door. Mira opened the door herself. For a moment, both stood quietly, surprised yet calm. She looked the same, graceful and kind, though her eyes carried a hint of sadness. Armin greeted her politely and said he had come to return something that belonged to her family. She invited him in with gentle curiosity. Inside her house, everything was simple and neat. Armin placed the two paintings on the table and told her the whole story, from finding the first painting in his attic to discovering the unfinished one in her grandfather's old house. He showed her the hidden note, the faint key mark, and how both paintings fit together. Mira listened silently, her eyes slowly filling with emotion. When he finished, she touched the paintings with trembling hands. Her voice was soft when she said, "Grandfather always wanted to teach us that love is stronger than distance. He once told me that if people truly see with love, they will always find their way back." Armin felt his throat tighten. The same words had been written in the letter hidden inside the frame. It was as if her grandfather's voice had reached both of them from beyond time. Mira looked at him and smiled gently, saying, "He must have known we would need this one day." They both stood quietly, looking at the paintings side by side. The two cottages, the bridge, the golden light of the sunset, it all seemed to tell their story. The paintings had become a mirror of their journey from togetherness to separation, and now to understanding. As the evening light entered through the window, Mira said softly, "Maybe we cannot change the past, but we can choose how to see it." Armin nodded. He realized that what mattered now was not the mistakes but the lessons they carried. The message from the paintings had done its work. It had brought peace back into their hearts. That evening, as he left her house, the sky was glowing in shades of gold, the same colors that had filled both paintings. For the first time in a long while, Armin felt light inside. He looked up at the sky and felt grateful for the wisdom of Ramesh Das, the painter who had built not only bridges on canvas, but also between hearts. After that meeting, something inside Armin changed quietly. The conversation with Mira had not only opened old memories, but had also brought peace. For the first time since the divorce, he felt that the weight in his heart had begun to lift. The paintings had done what words could not. They had created a path between two hearts that once forgot how to speak to each other. For the next few days, Armin kept thinking about that evening. He remembered the calm way Mira had spoken, the gentle smile on her face and the tears in her eyes when she saw her grandfather's handwriting. It had reminded him of the warmth that once filled their home. The air of silence between them now felt softer, not sharp like before. There was no anger, only understanding. He placed both paintings back on his wall side by side, exactly as they were meant to be. Each time he looked at them, he saw not just colors and shapes, but lessons about patience, love, and forgiveness. The bridge in the second painting now looked alive, glowing with light as if it carried a new meaning. He realized that the bridge was not only a part of the painting, but also a symbol of the connection that had started to grow again between him and Mira. One morning, Mira called him. Her voice was calm, and she thanked him again for finding the paintings. She told him that she had been thinking about her grandfather's words, and how they seemed to connect perfectly with their own story. Armin listened quietly. It felt good to hear her voice again after such a long time. Before ending the call, she said, "Grandfather always believed that art has the power to heal. Maybe this was his way of healing us." Those words stayed with Armin all day. He began to visit places he had not gone to since the divorce. The park near the river, the small cafe where he and Mira used to sit, and the art shop that still kept the smell of fresh paint. Each place carried memories that no longer hurt. Instead, they reminded him how beautiful moments could be when shared with a kind heart. One weekend, Mira invited him to a small exhibition being held in memory of her grandfather. Local artists were displaying their paintings inspired by his work. Armin agreed to come. When he arrived, he was surprised to see how many people admired Ramesh Das's art. The gallery was filled with soft music, warm light, and paintings full of hope. On one wall, there was a collection of old sketches made by the late artist. Each one had a small note written in pencil. One sketch showed a pair of hands holding a small sapling with the words, "Everything grows again if you give it care." Another sketch showed a sunrise with the note, Light always finds a way in. As Armin walked around,
He noticed Mira standing near a corner, where the two connected paintings were displayed together.
she had framed them beautifully, so that visitors could see how the cottage and the bridge formed one complete scene. People stopped to admire the work, and many asked about its story. Mira told them that her grandfather had painted it years ago, and that the message behind it was about rebuilding what was once broken. When she saw Armin, her eyes brightened with a gentle smile. They stood side by side, quietly looking at the paintings. Mira said softly, "It feels like he is here, watching his art bring people together." Armin nodded and said, "He left something far greater than colors on canvas. He left hope." For a while, they both watched the visitors stop, look, and smile at the artwork. It felt peaceful to see people connect with the same message that had changed their own hearts. When the evening grew quieter, Mira asked if Armin could help her carry some items to her car. As they walked outside, the cool night breeze touched their faces and the stars shone softly above. She looked at him and said, "I think Grandfather wanted us to remember what we once forgot." "Maybe that is why the painting found you." Armin smiled and replied, "Maybe it was his way of reminding us to look beyond what we see." They both laughed softly, sharing a moment that felt light and genuine. After the exhibition ended, Mira started spending more time painting again. She had once stopped after her grandfather passed away, saying she no longer felt inspired. But now, seeing his work and his messages had brought back her love for art. Armin often visited her small studio to see her new paintings. The colors she used were brighter, filled with life and peace. One afternoon, she showed him a new piece she had finished. It was a painting of two trees standing on opposite sides of a river, their branches stretching toward each other until they touched at the center. The sky behind them was filled with soft golden light. At the bottom of the painting, she had written, "When hearts learn to listen, distance disappears." Armin looked at it in silence for a while. The painting reflected everything they had gone through. It was simple yet powerful. He told her it was beautiful and that her grandfather would have been proud. She smiled and said, "I think he is proud of both of us. He wanted us to find our way, and now we have." From that day, their friendship began to grow again. They started meeting often, not to fix the past, but to appreciate the present. They talked about art, life, and the things they had learned from their journey. The more they spoke, the more they realized that the love they once shared had not completely faded. It had only changed its form, becoming gentler and wiser. One evening, as they walked by the riverside park, Mira told Armin that she was planning to open a small art school in memory of her grandfather. She wanted to teach young people not only to paint, but also to see meaning in what they create. Armin offered to help design the place. Together, they began to plan it. Over the next few weeks, they worked side by side on the layout of the school. Armin designed simple classrooms with large windows to let the sunlight in, while Mira chose soft colors for the walls to create warmth. They wanted the space to feel like a place of peace and inspiration. Working together reminded them of how well they once understood each other. When the art school finally opened, it was filled with energy and joy. Children painted freely, learning how to express their thoughts through colors. On the main wall of the school, Mira placed a copy of her grandfather's two connected paintings. Below it, she wrote a line in golden letters, "What is broken can still be rebuilt if you see with love, not only with eyes." Visitors often stopped to read those words and admire the paintings. Every time Armin saw them, he felt proud, not only for the school but also for the journey that had brought them here. The pain of the past had turned into a lesson of hope. As the days passed, Mira's art school became a place where people came to find peace. Armin visited often, helping with the designs for new rooms and gardens. The school garden had a small bridge built by Armin himself. He had made it to resemble the one from the painting. When he showed it to Mira, she smiled and said, "The bridge is real now, just as Grandfather wanted." Standing there beside her, watching the children play and paint, Armin felt that life had come full circle. The paintings, the message, the bridge, and the light had all led them here. It was not about going back to the past, but about finding new meaning in the present. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the golden light touched the bridge in the garden. Armin looked at it and thought of the journey that began with a forgotten painting in a dusty attic. He realized that sometimes the smallest discoveries can change the entire direction of a life. And for him, it had changed everything. The opening day of Mira's art school was filled with excitement and light. Children ran through the halls carrying brushes and palettes, laughing as they painted their ideas on canvas. Parents admired the warm, sunlit classrooms and the beautiful display of art on the walls. Among them, the two connected paintings of the cottage and the bridge stood proudly above the main entrance. The golden letters beneath them carried the message that had guided both Armin and Mira. What is broken can still be rebuilt if you see with love, not only with eyes. Armin stood beside Mira, watching the scene with a quiet smile. The journey from the dusty attic, the hidden painting, and the secret note had led them here. It felt surreal to see their past pain transform into something alive and full of purpose. The bridge from the painting had inspired a real bridge in the school's garden, symbolizing connection, care, and hope. Armin felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had not only rebuilt their hearts but were now helping others do the same. Mira walked beside him, holding a clipboard and giving instructions to the helpers setting up the garden area. She turned to him and said, "I still cannot believe how everything fell into place. It feels like grandfather guided us through all of this." Armin nodded. He did. The paintings, the messages, everything led us to see what truly matters. He paused, looking around at the children painting freely, their faces lit with joy. "And look at this. It's more than art. It's life being shared in its purest form." The day passed in a blur of activity. Armin helped organize the classrooms, arrange supplies, and even joined a few children painting their own mini-bridges. Mira noticed his focus and dedication, and a quiet warmth filled her heart. She realized that over the months they had both grown in ways they never expected. They were no longer the people who had drifted apart. They were now stronger, wiser, and more understanding of what it meant to care for someone truly. After the school activities ended, Armin and Mira sat on the small bridge in the garden, watching the sun slowly descend. The golden light reflected on the river beneath, and the shadows of the trees swayed gently in the breeze. It was peaceful, a moment that felt both sacred and ordinary at the same time. Mira turned to Armin and said softly, "I used to think life ends when something is broken. Now I understand that endings are just another way to begin." Armin smiled. "It took a painting, a note, and a bridge to teach me that. But I feel grateful. For the first time in months, I can see the future without fear." He looked at her, noticing the calm strength in her eyes. "And I feel like we can choose to build something new, together or apart, but with hope and care." Mira nodded, her lips curved into a gentle smile. "Grandfather always believed that love is not just an emotion, but an action. It is what you do to understand, to forgive, and to connect." Armand reached for her hand, and she did not pull away. The touch was light, but filled with meaning. It was a silent promise that they would approach the future with compassion, patience, and awareness. Over the next few weeks, the school became a hub for creativity and learning. Armand and Mira worked together seamlessly. While he handled the physical space and structure, she guided the young minds in art and expression. They discovered a rhythm in their collaboration, an unspoken understanding that made every task smoother and every moment brighter. The past no longer weighed them down. The hidden message from the paintings had done its work, and they were free to focus on growth, both personal and communal. One afternoon, a young girl came running to Armin, holding a small painting she had completed. It was a simple sketch of a bridge leading to a cottage with a golden sunset in the background. She said shyly, "I painted this because it makes me happy. My teacher says every painting has a story." Armin knelt beside her, looking closely at the colors and strokes. "It is beautiful. And yes, it has a story about hope and love and learning to see beyond what is broken." The girl's eyes sparkled as she nodded, and Armin felt a quiet satisfaction. He realized that Ramesh Das's wisdom was now reaching even the youngest hearts. That evening, after the school closed, Mira and Armin sat in the garden, looking at the stars beginning to appear in the sky. The soft golden light from the school reflected off the river and the small bridge they had built together. It was a moment of quiet reflection, of gratitude for all that had happened. Mira turned to him and said, "Do you remember the day you found the painting in your attic?" Armand nodded. "I do. I never imagined that one object could change everything." But it did. She smiled, a soft glow of contentment on her face. It was more than a painting. It was a guide, a teacher. It reminded us that love is not lost, only hidden, and now we see it clearly. Armin felt a deep sense of peace. The bridge and the painting, the bridge in the garden and the bridge between them were all symbols of understanding, connection, and hope. He realized that sometimes life gives gentle reminders through unexpected ways. A hidden note, a painting, a simple message. All could be powerful enough to guide someone toward healing. In the following weeks, Mira invited Armin to help select paintings for the next exhibition at the school. They spent hours discussing colors, shapes, and the stories behind each piece. They laughed, exchanged ideas, and even painted together. Each moment felt meaningful, not because of what they were building externally, but because of the bond that was growing between them again. The past mistakes and silence had taught them patience, and the paintings had taught them hope. One evening, as they closed the school for the day, Mira suggested planting a small garden around the bridge. They chose flowers that bloomed in golden shades matching the sunset in the paintings. Armin dug the soil while Mira planted the flowers carefully, laughing softly whenever a flower tilted in the wind. By the time the last flower was planted, the bridge glowed softly in the evening light, surrounded by life and beauty. Armin stepped back and looked at the scene. He realized that life could be rebuilt with care, just like the bridge in the painting. The beauty was not just in the art or the flowers, but in the act of rebuilding, nurturing, and connecting. Mira looked at him and said softly, "Grandfather's message worked. It brought us here." He nodded, feeling gratitude for the wisdom passed down through her grandfather's love. As the weeks turned into months, Armin and Mira continued to work together at the school. The children grew more confident in their art, and visitors were inspired by the connected paintings and the story behind them. Both Armin and Mira had found a renewed purpose in life. The past divorce no longer felt like a wound, but a lesson, a preparation for something meaningful. One calm evening, while they were closing the school for the day, Armin said, "I think grandfather's paintings taught us the most important lesson. Life is not about holding on to pain. It is about seeing what can be built with love." Mira smiled, holding his hand gently. "And it is also about sharing it. That is why the school exists, and why we exist in this space together." As the sun set in golden light over the bridge in the garden, both of them stood side by side. They had discovered that healing was possible, that connections could be rebuilt, and that love could transform pain into something beautiful. The paintings, the messages, and the bridge had led them to a new beginning, a life full of hope, care, and shared purpose. For the first time in a long while, Armin felt completely at peace. He looked at Mira and said softly, "Thank you for letting me be part of this journey." She smiled warmly and replied, "Thank you for being here. Together we built more than a school. We rebuilt hearts, including our own." The golden light from the sunset reflected on the bridge, on the paintings, and on the gentle smiles of both Armin and Mira. It was a perfect moment of understanding, love, and new beginnings. The past was behind them, and the future stretched ahead, filled with light, hope, and endless possibilities. The paintings no longer hung as mere objects on a wall. They were symbols of patience, care, love, and the power of seeing beyond what is broken. Armin and Mira had learned that life could be rebuilt if one looked with the heart, and together they embraced the new chapter with gratitude and joy, ready to face whatever came next, side by side.